First, let me say, this is Poets of the East. We are welcoming the charming and talented Nathalie. Would you help me with the pronunciation of your last name?
Sallegren.
Sallegren?
Sallegren.
Sallegren. Okay, yeah. Great. Nathalie Sallegren, so happy to have you. I've heard your marvelous poetry here and there across the globe. Always been intrigued. And when I heard just a little glimpse of some of your story, I thought, my goodness, this is a poet who needs to tell her story. It's such a marvelous background. I understand that you grew up in what we in the West call the East, or should we say at least the Pacific region. Talk to us a little bit about your young life.
Yeah, thanks, Richard or Rick. I just want to first start by thanking you for the invitation to come on board today. I'm really excited to be able to, share my inspirations and my background and motivations behind my writing. So I was actually, I spent my childhood in the South Pacific, correct. It was in Papua New Guinea. And wow. So we as a family moved there in the mid 70s. I was about one, I think, give or take a couple of months.
Can I tell you one thing? Academically, my background's in anthropology. So I have learned a lot studying what we call early human cultures or non-mechanized cultures. And of course, Papal New Guinea, to those of us who love anthropology, is just, Eden. It's an amazing thing. May I ask what brought you and your family to Papal New Guinea in the 70s?
Yeah, my parents were actually academics. And although back then they were teachers, which I guess is a form of academia, and they had spent their time gaining their qualifications in England. My dad's English originally and my mum's French. So they met in England when my mum was on exchange and sought adventure. So they actually lived in Africa before they went to Papua New Guinea. They lived in Africa. And my brother, in fact, was born in Zambia. And then they went back to the UK and lived in Bristol for a while where my dad upgraded his qualifications, I think, to a master's, and then they moved through to Papua New Guinea, so seeking further adventures. I think they wanted something.
I bet they succeeded.
Yeah. I think they were just really both interested in different cultures, and I think that they felt like they lacked something there in their hometowns and in their former lives. So they were both quite adventurous and curious.
May I ask, did you live in a city or outside a city?
Yeah, we lived near the University of Papua New Guinea, so that's where both of my parents worked and gained their PhDs out there. So Wonderful. My dad was a historian there and did his PhD on
historian. Oh my goodness.
History of education in Papua New Guinea. Wow. And my mum did her PhD on linguistics and Papua New Guinean English, actually. So
interesting stuff.
Yeah. We grew up near the university, and I went to an international primary school. I went to daycare and kindergarten and then to primary school. So that's my formative years there, actually.
But if I'll ask just one more question in that arena, if you will. It was the language in that international school English or French?
It was English, but I was from a bilingual home. So no, definitely English, because there was a patois of types of Creole that was born out of English through Papua New Guinean language. So there was a Papua New Guinean English that was spoken as well, and then there were dialects too. But definitely the school's language was English.
Well, I'm going to leave my assumptions aside. I would guess, however, that you probably started living a creative life quite young.
Actually, I had my mind opened, and which ultimately leads to creativity. So I was definitely exposed to a number of different cultures and languages, and everything that goes along with it: music, food, ideologies, everything, without realizing it was happening.
Now,
Yes.
did you grow up, if you will, in Papua New Guinea, or did your parents continue to move?
Well, actually, we were really lucky that with the agreement with the university, we were able to travel back to my parents' home countries every second year. So we would go to France, the south of France, and spend every second Christmas there, and then hop over to see my father's mum, on the same trips, and on the way to those destinations, we would go via other countries and just do extended stopovers, for example, in Tokyo or Singapore or anywhere in Malaysia, and yeah, sort of see those countries as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, okay, leaving my assumptions aside, when did you start finding yourself as an artist, poet, writer, author?
Possibly. Well, I used to write a lot and read a lot, leading into my teens. I think I really picked up writing, journal writing, really. And when we moved to Australia, I was about 11 or 12, and my dad would read poetry to me. He already read poetry to me when I was a child, but it developed then, and he would read a lot deeper, darker work. And I would, just listen, and I'm not sure I thought too much about it, but certainly it had an impact on me. And then when I went to university, I studied English literature and theatre, which is a complete waste if you're living in an English-speaking country. But then when I moved to Finland, it's become useful in practical ways. But yeah, so when I studied theatre, I started writing. I wrote monologues and plays, and and then I took a pause for a bit after being so thrown in intensively into the literary world. I got a bit of burnout, I think, and stepped away from it. I actually became a librarian, an organizer of information rather than a user. I taught other people how to use information and access it. So yeah, and then
Go ahead.
No, and then there was a huge break. And when I moved to Finland, then in my mid-30s, I started to think about literature again, poetry specifically.
I have a real profound reverence for libraries and librarians.
Yeah.
They are such an important repository of ideas, of culture, of literature, and of human knowledge, just basic human knowledge. I had an opportunity in Miami, where I was living at the time. They retired the first original library and moved it to a new facility. And they invited a lot of writers to contribute something on what libraries mean to them. And I wrote what I thought was an imaginative tale about a student in Alexandria who did what students do, partied out and hung out with his friends, and then had to race to the library to get some books and material for his studies. But that morning was the morning of the burning of the Alexandrian library. So when he came to the library, there it was on fire, and his goals of learning were put aside. And I tried to imagine what it must have been like with that repository of human knowledge from ancient times, to see it go up in smoke. And I have profound respect for librarians, especially since we have right now in this country, in America, I would say an attack on literacy, an attack on knowledge, an attack on science, an attack on libraries. And the talk is of burning books.
Yeah. Yeah, librarians also are often the first point of attack. They're quite vulnerable in a cultural space, often with new builds and so on, and the way that libraries are progressing, the space is definitely modified to suit today's technological age, but unfortunately that means then that collections are minimized, and along with that goes staff and job types, and then it can be quite easily written out that the specialization of a librarian needs to exist at all. So in fact, when librarians are trained, because that's the extra qualification I got on top of my literary degree, is they are taught, in fact, to learn how to defend themselves and their positions. It's part of I mean, you learn it because when you're learning, you feel really passionate about what you're learning, and you know, because you've chosen that field, or in some ways it's chosen you, and so you really feel like, you know, you have to be able to sing the reasons that you should exist, or a library should exist in any way. So, and of course it depends on governance always. Economics completely can turn around within a change of government. You know, every time it goes towards a conservative government, librarians, you know, tense up and breathe in deep. You know,
it might not surprise you to know that during the Bush administration, famous for torture and black sites and renditions, there was actually a statement made, because I'm a political writer, there was a statement made by our federal police that the greatest danger to the democracy is by librarians. And I don't know how you can satirize that.
No, it's true, because it's true. You're talking about a well-educated group of people who thrive in democracy and culture and know how to defend themselves through educative means. So that's.
So I drew a picture of an archetypal librarian, right, with a pencil in her hair and her arms crossed, and a bunch of FBI agents groveling on the ground.
Yeah.
My
very
goodness,
powerful position.
How dare they have those ideas and seek to share them?
But not just share them, but teach people how to use them for themselves.
Well, thank you. Enough for the preliminaries. Now, so tell us, you know, you said you wrote some plays. What writers do you admire?
Okay, I wasn't expecting that question.
Well, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
No, I didn't. My writers, I guess the classics I studied at school, but I'm not sure that I find them such. I don't know. Maybe definitely T.S. Eliot was definitely an influence. That was the earlier poets that my dad used to read me. And I'm not sure that I fully understood the work, but definitely the intricacies and the storytelling in a complex and sort of hidden messages. And yeah, I think that's a standout for me. But then on the other side of the coin, Dr. Seuss, that's a huge impact on me. And I have a piece actually written in to try and mock those who mock Dr. Seuss as a poetic influence. So yeah, I don't know. Then later on, I would read a lot of, in fact, Indigenous authors or Black authors as well. So maybe Maya Angelou in more recent days. Yeah, but yeah, there's a whole scope of writers. Yeah.
Okay, there's a place, I think, a transition in a writer's life where they change from being satisfied writing those things down that they have to write down, and then taking those and sharing them. When did that change happen for you? Sometime tomorrow?
It's probably, sorry, a few years ago. Yeah, I took to the stage, and I thought it was time to speak what I'd written, and I did it because I had no other way of explaining to people what I'd experienced. And I thought that there's like had some really significant places I'd lived and experiences of living in different cultures, and now that I live in one that's quite contained, shall we say, I feel like I needed to express that. I felt, yeah. So
a few years ago. Okay. Well, live performance is such a wonderful, complicated thing. Did you go to a theater space or a cafe space? What were your first experiences like?
Cafe space. Yeah, it was in a small town nearby here, where a friend colleague of mine was organising poetry events, and I thought, okay, I'll try. And I watched some, and I thought, hey, I can do this. I've got words I've written, and you know, I wanted to try it out. And I'm sort of always on a borderline of being, I'm quite a shy person, but also I've studied theatre and I have technical skills within the theatre. So I know that I can express myself well if I can get over the nerves. So
nobody out there but us people, that's for sure.
Yeah. So it was a cafe space.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask the terrain question, even though sometimes it doesn't make sense. But I do always want to know, is there a theme or a target or an arena that you like to write about? Is it, emotional space? Is it political space? Is it, capturing those elusive moments? Or is it muse driven and you basically write what you're given to write? Where do you fall in that arena, that space?
I have a great passion for writing political pieces, but I haven't written as many as I'd like. Yeah. So
I won't be here that long. You can write today.
So yeah, my goal is to get back in that space because I haven't felt that for a while, or felt like I've had the right way to express it for a little while.
I live in a very warlike culture, and I oppose it, and have opposed it as long as I had a writing voice. And unfortunately, I've had way too many wars to oppose. Way too many wars to oppose. And I have so much appreciation for other writers who, don't just do the essay, don't just do the prose, but stretch those wings and really address the spirit of political discourse.
Yeah. I was just going to say there are wars happening at the moment, but when I go to write about it, I don't feel like it's my place, or I can't quite find my space in that, in the answer that I need to give. Yeah.
And you're in Finland now?
Yeah, that's right.
So you've got this neighbor right next door that's
true. Yeah.
Not doing humanity much good.
No, you're absolutely right. And maybe it's writer's block then. But there's definitely a hesitancy for me to write yet on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, living in the culture that I do, I have plenty to critique. Plenty. It's about time that we turn to letting Miss Nathalie read some of her work.
Okay. Okay.
Anything you'd like to
Thank you,
read, my
Rick.
dear?
Yes, I have made some selections, and the pieces I've selected reflect a little on what we've spoken about in this interview, which is lucky. The first piece I'd like to read is, I think, the first piece I ever performed, and it reflects that the culture shock I felt when I moved from Papua New Guinea into the outback of Australia.
Wow.
So I was about 11, 12 then. And I mean, Australia is a great place and I learnt to love it. But at the time of moving, I really didn't appreciate it and see the value, the beauty, especially the Australian character, because I did move into a mining town, a gold mining town from the tropics. And so, yeah, I really felt that as a cultural shock. So this piece is called Ground. Dry, cracked earth, rusted red, iron ore. It matches the dehydrated, aging, wrinkled, saggy skin on the worn miners' red necks. Beer drenches their thirst. Or is that just an excuse? These boys deserve their drink time. They earned it. They earned all those loose tits serving a schooner right before they swore they'd rid her. But the smell of the earth when that hot rain smacks on the land, I can forgive that sham of the Aussie man as I breathe in the life the eucalypt sighs, and I close my eyes to feel the heat rise and sigh a relief so high I lift my mind to a greater spire where I can almost touch my childhood. In the deep, dank, wet wood of the tropics I stood. Ground. My memories drift back to the dense smell of sweaty rain as it splats on the ground, this time soaking in, sodding the earth that is mine. And I squat and I squash and savour the mud between my toes, up into my arches, holding the moment my eyes stare. Body breathes in, voices dull in the distance, sun glinting, hinting existence at the faraway land, and I stand. And the fat, flat drops on the lower wax leaves, the tune of the lighter rain tinkling through the canopy, softly sprinkling over my face, looking up and seeing nothing but where I want to be.
Beautiful. Really beautiful.
Thank you.
Very transportive.
Thank you. Yeah, so that the earlier question that you had earlier, when was that transformation of wanting to read, being ready to read things that needed to be read as opposed to writing what was needed to be written. But that, I think that actually was a bit of both. I really needed to write that. That was an early piece, but then it was also one piece that I needed to perform, and I ended up winning a slam with that, which is, it's not really a slam poem, but yeah, definitely the audience responded. So yeah.
I have a real mixed reaction to what I call competitive poetry. It is silliness at the height to have poems compared to each other. I think if there is some measure stick, it is, do you reach people? Do you say something that they can hear, that they receive? Right. And that's not to say that a poem that is incomprehensible is necessarily bad. It's just that it serves a different kind of purpose. Being a narrative poet, of course, I tend to favor that sort of thing, but I appreciate the onomatopoeia stuff as well, but I think that's eloquent. That's very, very eloquent.
Thank
I
you.
don't think you could hear that and not be transported from a tropical rainforest to a dry, arid mining town. Bravo. Bravo.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, but I have a few that sort of focus on the sort of the rainforest feeling, and but yeah, I can't help but get into political space sometimes, or like get into like find a character to
Well, you're a thinking human being.
Yeah. Yes. So the next piece actually also reflects that culture shock that I felt. But I wrote it, and then my mum, in fact, translated it into French. So I'd like to read both of those for you, if that's possible.
Absolutely.
And you'll have to excuse my pronunciation. I'm still a bit rusty with my French since.
Well, listen, since my French is almost non-existent, I have no room to criticize.
Okay, but yeah.
Let me just
anyway, I still
speak.
feel like I have to explain.
Well, I'm going to ask you to speak up just a little bit, okay?
Ah, sure. Yeah. Mon choix de pluie a changé. Ma fille habite les tropiques. Elle porte des jupes courtes et a des cicatrices aux genoux à force de tomber de vélo. Elle passe nu-pieds dans les flaques d'eau et prend des sandales à l'école. Elle respire l'humidité à fond et la savoure de tous ses sons. Exactement avant que la pluie ne tombe, elle rigole de plaisir lorsque les gouttes chaudes fondent en plouf sans savoir que leur composition chimique odorante est naturelle, tandis que la goutte de rouille au fond de sa gorge, elle finira par le comprendre, vient de nickel qui brûle dans l'eau de fourneau à bout de la rue, pas loin de sa nouvelle école. So now in English, my taste of rain has changed. My girl lives in the tropics. She wears short skirts, has scars on her knees from learning to ride her bike. She walks barefoot in puddles and wears sandals to school. She breathes the damp in deep, drinks it in with all her senses just before the rain falls. She giggles with delight when hot droplets plop, not knowing that the fragrant chemical compounds are natural. Not like the taste of rust at the back of her throat she'll learn to understand as the nickel's burning in the smelter up the road from her new school.
Very nice. Very nice. You have such a fine way with words. I know I'm just among the legion that have told you that, but you really have a lovely touch.
Thank you. That's really lovely of you to say so. The next piece is political, and it's an epic piece, actually. I was wondering if I can share my screen with you.
Hold on a second. Let me set that up.
Sharing with you my blog, which I use as a repository because I'm not quite sure what to do with my work. So it lands here. So the piece I'm actually going to share with you today is called The Great Rock. And this piece was written in direct inspiration of having lived in Central Australia. I was the campus librarian of a college for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And when I was the librarian there, the Australian Prime Minister at the time did a formal apology to Aboriginal people for specifically for the stolen generation years, for having stolen children from kinships and families through the 19th century and 20th century. And it was a really significant moment. And I was in the student lounge when that was televised, and I felt the chill. I felt the sensation of what that apology, how that apology was felt by the student body. And so, So anyway, this piece, I won't go on it. I'll just read the piece. It's called The Great Rock. Nothing is sacred. When you see a long queue to the peak of Mount Everest, when the mystique of the Himalayan range can't simply be admired for its grandeur, when humans push themselves so far the force of ambition takes over in the next prosperous step to strike that off our list, that we climb that cliff. When the queue of traffic means people can't listen to their bodies and instead fall dead. Nothing is sacred. When rivers worldwide polluted by antibiotics, where wildlife swims in the thick water streams which exceed environmentally safe standards by over 300 times, when from the deepest depths we trawl out plastics idly strewn at family picnics, nothing is sacred. When gas pipelines built over significant sites, lands which hold a different wealth, half-baked assumptions that modern infrastructure fit entire populations do not take in for our consideration. First world standards placed firmly on third world conditions. The gap is increasing. We spend our time thinking, why is this not working? No one is sacred. 20th century Australia, generations of babies stolen from families bred into white society, death of a culture on slow cooker, lost leaders and knowledge systems, desert survival techniques caught up in an earlier slaughter. Over 200 languages in Australia alone dropped to 130, and we only consider this as we read the statistics. We pour poisonous alcohol in the colonial wounds and it widens the gaping gap of inequality. Parallel existence running alongside poverty does not give us immunity. Nothing is sacred. When a white man has a budget in his fat hand, and the introduction of white flour was so long ago now. Authorities hold identities in the form of plastic, cards with numbers and names on record. Water is the only sacred resource left, but pipelines don't reach all communities. No one is sacred. In 2007, Central Australia, during the intervention, government gave themselves authority again to remove children from their families. Judgments made from systematic abuse. This time they sent army troops into remote townships, taking babies from their mamas. The removal of children from kinship, systems which are complex and none of our business. Really, we'd only spent the last few decades putting band-aids on the loss of a culture. Nothing is sacred when the stiff upper lip gives way with a pompous puff. Am I going to climb that giant rock or that rock now? Uluru now. Traditional owners have passed a white man's law somehow that this is a significant site. And that battle, we don't realise, has meant working for decades alongside institutionalised bureaucratic leaders, learning a language that symbolises many deaths of original dialects in order to give it a current presence, schooling in systems that were not their own to learn laws that had nothing to do with their land, fighting fights detracting from strengthening own identity. And as I sit here with my memories, feeling strongly about what should be, we're dumbed down by our flashing screens as we scroll down to find the right article to read, so we can all stand quite proudly and say, yes, it is politically incorrect to climb the Great Rock. But in the last days of the truest trailblazers trudging toe to toe, the same ignorance is shown true class by riding down on the skin of their asses. Is nothing sacred.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And the last part of that refers to that there was a law passed 2 years ago, and finally the last climb on Uluru was early 2020, I think. 2000. Yeah. But there were still people clambering to the top to make sure that they could get a chance to climb Uluru.
Yep. We have an identical site in a sense. What Americans call Mount Rushmore was carved from mountains that the natives called the Seven Grandfathers.
Right. Yeah,
And
I think I've
it,
read
it
that.
sounds,
Yep.
it has to sound like a direct insult, a calculated insult
Yeah.
to carve into those mountains and put American icons in there.
Yeah.
And it's,
And then put it in all the books. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
May I read a small one for you, my dear? I
Please.
think it's only fair. I'm asking you to read, and you're doing such an eloquent job. Let me read this little one to you.
Please, that would
It's
be
one
great.
of my, even more than political, it's a cultural comment. A friend of mine gently criticized me by saying, Rick, you write well, but you write so sarcastic. Write something positive, for God's sakes. And I said, you make a valid point. I'll concede that. So I wrote this. It's called Non-Disposable World. Picture a world without thermonuclear overkill. Bomb lost its thrill? It will. It will. Picture it. A world after all the bombs are gone. Too far, Mon? Bomb lost its thrill? It will. It will. Picture it. A world not holding its breath at the edge of death. The toxic waste, the chemical taste of food, and money only good. Bomb lost its thrill? It will. It will. Picture it. No mad generals with pointing digit poised, ears pinned, filled with noise of shouts, of doubts. Bomb lost its thrill? It will. It will. Picture it. A world after the end of biological weapons that fools would send threaten. Bomb lost its thrill? It will. It will. Picture it. No fanatic, dramatic, climactic climate war. No inversions or floods or earthquake cone crunch. Too much heat then or dry. No clouds in the sky. No rain with lunch. Bomb lost its thrill? It will. It will. Picture it. No ray guns in space. No thistly-whistly missiles to bless the stratosphere torn or hot heads wind down. Burn after space war. Afterthought. It had meant quite a lot. Picture it. The bomb's gone, the missiles dismissal, the sub decommissioned, no reactors out fishing. Picture it. The control board's turned off. I hear a scoff. Bomb lost its thrill. It will. It will. The repetitive lines that you used in that last one reminded me of this one. So
yeah, that was really powerful piece, Rick. Yeah, and I'm not altogether sure there was lacking any
sarcasm.
Sarcasm.
Truth be told.
However, it was necessary. Yeah.
No one else has ever called me on that.
No, I'm specialist in sarcasm.
My dear.
Yeah.
Please continue.
This one is not sarcastic though. This following one actually, I called myself out halfway through the piece and changed it to become positive, because one can get a little carried away in feeling sorry for oneself in whatever position they're in. But when I was writing it, I realized through it that in fact this was a a significant experience that people generally don't have the opportunity to experience, to live. So this is called a global citizen. A loaded gunner asks her, "Where do you belong?" A change management expert, community covert, international chameleon, dyslexic in origin, packed full of traditions lost, entangled in conditions, tossed in my repetitive, incessant culture shock. Cultivated by a hardcore feminist matriarch with a past left in the dark farmyards near the vineyards of southern France, rounded out by a kind-hearted father who defied his own destiny, leaving coal mine industry of soot-ridden England, sought to fill curiosity. Bouncing from continent Europe to Melanesia, Australasia, and back again. My mother tongue, twice removed, is fading away again. My second language gave way, distorted by the wretched dregs of the Aussie rednecks. My third languages, 1 and 2, Pidgin English and Motu, gone. But for the handful of go-tos, Finnish, and now Swedish have me craving my origins. I fit nowhere and everywhere simultaneously as I'm saying. You see, I'd love to explain to you about the dislocated sensation of acculturation in my impending modification to the next location, but I think you might get jealous. Need to belong seems to penetrate my motivation for assimilation. Schools up to here, some of which helped me to see what not to be, self-esteem plummeting as no school system really fit me, alien. It's okay though if I think of myself as a fish on a bicycle, where the imagery ironical maintains my confidential, which gave me soul sensational. A water rises in pools I swam in at the footstep of my home now drowning. Corrupt systemic pollutants repel me from the corners I used to hide in. Third world existence flail against first world betrayals in the shrill vast hearts of the bastards that bask in their own good fortune. A waterfall surround and beat down around me. A boom rush of memories exhilarate my freedom. Sun's glance sees me, dancing droplets leap up and greet me. Crystal rapids giggle and tease me, and liberty suspends atmospherically. And I look down on the puddle. It's been such a muddle of vast open oceans, of distant commotions. And my passports now gleam from opportunity. It depends how you look at it, see? International citizen. So when I ask you, where are you from? I don't mean, where do you belong? I mean, what shaped you? What makes you? How did you become the being that you are, and where do your hopes take you?
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you.
How nice. Very biographical,
Yeah.
And philosophical at the same
Yeah.
time. A marvelous piece. Very, very marvelous.
Yeah. Thank you.
A meditation on yourself. How nice. How nice.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I have to write pieces that explain everything. There's too much to just have one small snapshot of part.
Well, I think many poets find writing and the writing process self-revelatory. We write to help understand ourselves. These conflicting tides, the social currents that surround us and how we make a place in it. The use of the fish on the bicycle metaphor, how wonderful. And while I cannot experience what you've experienced, I have some appreciation for what you're saying. there's no culture that exactly fits you because you are a person of so many cultures.
Mm.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Well said. Well
Thanks.
said. You're welcome to read a few more.
Yeah, I think I've found it.
Good. Good.
It's an early one, so it's a bit clunky, but I definitely had fire in my belly when I wrote it.
Good. Good. Bravo.
I was written about 2018 when there was an influx of refugees into Europe, and Finland had promised place, but then didn't really deliver on that, and put up a lot of bureaucratic walls and continue to do so. This piece is called "This Is Not a Political Poem." Because Finland is a very lovely place to live, and it is a socialist democracy. However, that also means that people shy away from politics here, and they don't really like to get involved in heated political discussions or really portraying thoughts on these. So that's why I called it "This Is Not a Political Poem," so it wouldn't offend anyone until I started it. So this is not a political poem. These are just thoughts that I own. This is not a political fight. This is a plight for human rights. There's been a frenzy of acceptance, a chorus calling all at once. Now we know this is significant, working together to pay the rent, working together to build a net. This is me, a human calling for humans to help. A human who lived through hell and fled, who ran from their home and their own sweet bed, crossed seas, lost families, a mother and her babies. Let's take a man with skills, a woman with skills, and a child with a will, a history so deep, a culture steeped in rich qualities. Can't we enable these? Imagine the potential, the propensity for power propelled beyond the final hour. Visualize the scheme. Consider the atrocities if you happen to have seen them. I won't go through details. We've all seen the newsreels. I don't want to be political because then they'll label me hysterical. There's several parts to this story and I'm going all out for glory. First, the worst, babies drowning, factions vowing, bombs showering, idiots howling and banging their chests. There's no accounting. It keeps compounding. My heart's pounding and I'm just browsing. Then there's the rest. So, if a moment of thought caught you off guard, if a transient notion flew right past, if a second in time made the light bulb shine, what would you think? Don't make them big. They've got no energy left. This ain't political poesy. This is cause for humanity. Our conscience feels ill at ease. We got to find accountability, question those in high esteem, test the United Nations, bounce repudiation. This is not a political plight now. This is a fight for human rights now. And that's that.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Thank you. That's been
Absolutely
hidden for a
lovely.
long time, Rick. Thank you for bringing that to the fore.
My dear, it is such an honor to have you with me. I'm going to read one more for you. This is not so much political as it is cultural.
Okay.
It's called Set My Trillionaires Free. They're going on a planetary orbital spree. It's far more fun than paying you or me. Why dirty yourself with another employee on the shelf that thinks they're as human as me myself? If they can make it to work, that's all I care. Who cares a whit as long as they can stand right there? Sure, my workers sickly stand while I count each moment with my eagle eye. Commit any transgression, you're immediately sacked. Pause for a moment, you're stealing a penny from my back. Stop for a break, you're not a machine. You don't understand precisely what you mean. Stop for an hour and have a lunch, you're stealing from my plate. And I'm repeating again, don't you ever dare be late.
Yeah.
Nathalie, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Let me ask you one final question. When you meet the next young person who says, Nathalie, how do you do it? How do you write so beautifully and so eloquently? Should I even try? What do you say to that young poet?
I'd probably say I don't. But thanks anyway. I just write what I feel. And yeah, so at the moment I'm running some ekfrastek workshops, writing workshops, because I think that a lot of people are hesitant to write. And actually, I think it's a little bit like libraries, you know, people are hesitant to go in libraries because they don't really know what it's about, or yeah, and it's not trendy. But I definitely, I think that everybody's got something to say. And there's so much emotional turmoil and anxiety right now. And bodies are changing, people are changing, thoughts are changing. And I think that writing is definitely a way to be able to deal with that and access those traumatic thoughts, but use them as a form of healing politically as well. And yeah, to be able to access that. So it's a form of accessing yourself. And I think that that's definitely why somebody should write. Young people out there. But I want to thank you, Rick, for inviting me to read and speak today in the interview.
I do these because as much as I enjoy those Zoom things, they're marvelous. I have met charming poets, heard wonderful truth that I never would have heard otherwise, and I bless them every day. But the thing that I feel lacks in those, and it's, it's kind of like excess of joy. I love the time to talk to the poets. I want to hear what brought you there. What, you speak your heart so beautifully, but how does your heart get delivered there? What joys, what turmoils, what was your start? So that's why I do these. It's
I really admire that, Rick, because there's a build up to reading your own piece, and you prepare yourself for this sort of 3 minutes of box time, and you hope to God that you get it right. And and then you also, you get to hear some amazing work, but it can be quite tiring to work through all of that to get to a moment that you're not prepared for, actually, because it's called on so quite suddenly, and then you have to deliver.
Well, one of my favorite parts is they'll publish a list and then they'll change the random order.
But what I do appreciate is that I have had access to be able to develop my work since COVID, because that really cut the world off in so many ways. But in fact, the Zoom world opened up a myriad of opportunities for me to be able to reach out, connect with people, and also develop my own work and my own craft. So, yeah.
Well, thank you again, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Rick. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And
I'm going to go out and do some gardening. So
lovely.
It's going to be a real difference.
Good.
Thank you again. I'll let you know when we publish this. Thanks
Wonderful.
so much.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Bye-bye.
I'll see you in the Zoom room next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.